Welcome, everybody. This is a great opportunity to really have a group of people on the same call that have a variety of experience, both in starting businesses, running co-manufacturing facilities, and really understanding what it takes to go to market. So what we're going to do is we're going to just have a conversation here about some of the opportunities that maybe will help the audience here and all of us kind of learn more about how to manage the co-manufacturing industry and the opportunities for our brands. I'm going to start with Bill. And Bill, if you could kind of share with us, like, how do you know if your startup or your business, even if it's not a startup, is ready for a co-manufacturer versus making it your own, starting your own manufacturing facility? And if you could just give a real quick background on yourself, Bill, before going into that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Skeens. I'm the former founder and CEO of a company called Prairie City Bakery, which I started back in 1994. And we sold fully baked, frozen, thaw and sell baked goods. We started with one product, which was muffin tops. And in the end, we had 125 different SKUs. We sold into 30,000 locations. But one of the things that relates to this topic is the only oven I owned was a microwave to heat up my coffee in the morning, because we outsourced our manufacturing to 11 different co-packers. Over the span of Prairie City Bakery, we had 23 different co-packers. So one of the keys is to find the right co-packer for you. And to me, the right co-packer is a reliable source of supply, which is the right amount of product at the right place at the right time and not too much of it. The not too much of it is really a difficult situation for startup companies, because they often approach co-packers that are not necessarily appropriate for them at that time, because of the fact that they might turn a machine on, it goes for 8 hours, and they don't have the volume to do that. So I think it's key to know a little bit about the co-packer that you're going into, to make sure that you're a good fit. And you're going to find out pretty quick, because the co-packer will tell you whether you're a good fit. But when is the right time to find a co-packer? The reality is if you've been manufacturing it either yourself or in a pilot plant or another smaller co-packer, it's really when you have too much business that you can't handle the production yourself. And because when you're dealing with any of the co-packers out there, they're literally your business partners, and they want to make sure that that they're making money and that you're making money in the process. So the reality is that you've got to have an idea, you've got to have a product, and you've got to have an idea where you're going to build that business pretty quick, because the co-packer is interested in building business with you, but it's only if they can make money and you can make money.
Any other thoughts about that, as far as finding the right co-packer, the right size, and knowing when to pull that trigger?
Yeah, so I can go ahead, Cathy. I think there are a couple of parameters.
Could you just give a real quick background on yourself?
Yes, of course. I am Prabal Chaudhri. I am the president and founder of new to the world brand called Brave Good Kind. In our scenario, we decided to go a co-packer route right out of the bat. And one of the considerations we had was, the first thing that's, I think, really important is that you would want to consider co-packer if you believe you've achieved a product market fit, right? You don't want to go, co-packing, is a very intensive round, whether it's a resource intensive, that's what I would say. Both for you and your partner, it takes a time, a lot of care, and a lot of expertise to get into that. But I would say, first, we need to be sure that our product is viable, and I think that's something that you should think about. Second, I always encourage all the founders to think about is whether you're running a small business or a startup, because there are different considerations you have, and that really also raises the point is, what is your cash situation in terms of like how your fundamentals of your business is. And once you are confident that you have something where you really want to scale, like Bill said, you really want to produce to a volume that your business can support, that's when it would be a good idea to start engaging with co-packer who can really help you scale up. But one of the important consideration also is that it cannot be one trick pony, in the sense you need to think about now as well as down the line. So you cannot get in and out. If you get the co-packer route, you need to create systems in which you can at least get to a point where you can produce regularly. It might not be every week or every in a regular cadence, and because that's when it will be a win-win situation for both you and the co-packer.
Thank you.
If I were just to add to both of what Bill and Prabal said, I think it's the kind of the theme that you're hearing is that it's really a point of self-reflection of who you are as a business owner, but also what type of business you're planning on starting. And so, from Prabal's perspective, he's started out kind of going for a co-packer based on the competencies that he was looking for from a manufacturing standpoint and what he's bringing to the table. I started a little different. I started from a production standpoint because we were starting kind of on a smaller scale and wanted to understand just the process a little deeper, and then we transitioned to a co-packer. So I think it's really a process that you can go through to try and figure out where you are, what you're trying to do. If you have a ton of cash, or if you already have investors, if you have a proven product, or you understand that it's a strong market fit, and your core competency isn't production, maybe trying to find a co-packer right out the gate is what's right for you. If you're starting from kind of point zero and you feel like you have a strong competency in production or in recipe development, then maybe starting at a smaller scale, kind of managing production is the path for you. And then as you go along the course of your operation, you're going to have another decision point as to, if you start out producing, do you transition to a co-packer after a certain amount of demand comes in, or do you now invest in managing production yourself? The key there is that if you're producing, you're no longer a marketer, you're no longer, or you may be all of those things, but now you are also a co-packer or a production facility, and versus handing off that piece to someone who owns that core competency.
Excellent point. Thank you. One of the questions we get a lot, or I've heard a lot, is how, if I'm ready, I know I've got to expand, I've got to find more capacity. How do I find a co-manufacturer? Josh, you obviously, with your experience, and any of you here, Bill as well, with your numerous co-packers and co-manufacturers that you've worked with for the in your businesses, is there kind of a best practice, or how would you recommend somebody go find an appropriate co-manufacturer?
Well, so I would, Distinctive Foods, we operate facilities, bakery facilities here in Chicago, really since 1976. And I would argue that the perspective of the manufacturer is, who are you getting in bed with? And it's really a partnership. And when we get approached, several times a week by people looking to have product made for them, there seems to be a growing dichotomy between thems that makes it and thems that markets it, or that kind of thing. And if I take Prairie City as an example, as a manufacturer, you're kind of betting on the jockey, not just the horse. So when somebody would approach a manufacturer to have product made for them, it needs to be clear what they're bringing to the party and what the longer term perspective. The very few manufacturers want to get into something short term. When you're making you don't really make money at it until you get good at it, and the learning curve is really, it's not a theoretical construct. It takes a while to get good at it, and most manufacturers are going to be looking for a longer term, if not a really long term. And Bill, I think we've been making product for Prairie City pretty close to since 95, 6, 7, something like that, still
Yeah,
currently.
It's important, I think, that the length of time. And I know, Bill, we've talked before about that just because you start in one place doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up. And how do you find the right co-packer? Is there an industry list somewhere? Is there a consultant you should use? How do people go about finding a co-packer or co-manufacturer?
So I found it in numerous ways, and I think it's very different when you're starting off versus at the end, or not the end, but towards as you're more developed in the marketplace. I think that you have to have an idea about what people's capabilities are, and I mean I found co-packers many different ways. I found co-packers just by looking at lists or dialing up in the phone book or whatever and trying to find them. I would also approach people at industry trade shows. I would also talk to equipment manufacturers that I knew made the equipment of the product and the process that I needed, because those are the people that know where, and also other suppliers that they know where those products are made. I would talk to packaging suppliers because they know if the product is packaged, the machine that is used and in what environment. And I would ask them, where you had sold a product that would be used in the production that we had. And then, and I think that one of the keys is you have to not be afraid to ask questions. And you have to, if you, of other industry people that can get you to the point that you have. And I think the point that Josh made was very, very important is, I had a relationship with Josh and his company for well over 25 years. And the reality is that if it's a short-term deal, I was never looked at as a threat to any of the co-packers because I didn't have any manufacturing. If you also have your own manufacturing and you're looking to fill in with something else, I think you're going to have a tough sell to sell that co-packer into producing, because he knows you're going to go right back to what it is when you have the increased capacity. And I was never interested in the manufacturing to manufacture my own product. Our motto was do what you do best and outsource the rest. And clearly the co-packers we had knew how to make the product that we were asking them to make. And many people ask me, why did you have 11 different co-packers? Well, no co-packer did. I mean, the 11 co-packers didn't do 125 different items. They did the items that they were good at and could make. And so in the bakery business, it's very different processes that go on. So the donut business is different than the brownie business, which is different than the cookie business. They're all different processes. So you have to find the right fit, and you have to also the person also has to be willing to grow with you. And in Josh's case, he was willing to grow with us, and we grew together as far as the business going forward. And today he makes their number one selling item.
That's great.
I don't own the company anymore, so I can't say it's my company, but
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, going back to the point how you approach it, I think it's like, when you think about hiring somebody for your team, you have to take a similar approach to finding the right partner, which is your co-packer. You need to, sell him to the purpose, to the dream that you have. Why, what's your reason to be? You have to get that person excited. You need to start building that trust and a relationship. So I think I always think about this as equivalent to find, you're hiring somebody. You don't hire somebody if that person is not a fit. So I think, you try to, talk to different folks, like Bill said. I found a lot of success finding potential co-packer in a trade show. And, it was not that I was looking for. They will come to a booth, they get excited by the product, they get excited by the proposition. And I think that's where, the magic really starts to happen, where, like Josh said, they have access to a lot of opportunities, and they have to pick and choose what opportunities that they want to pursue that would be kind of a win for them long term. So that's where, every co-packer that I have at least come to terms with, they have their plates full, but they're always looking to do something which is disruptive because they are trying to build their business, they're trying to build their legacy. And I think if we truly understand the drivers, and it begins in terms of really positioning yourself and as your product with as much clarity as possible, that's when that relationship starts seeding. And I think that's the first way to really approach, based on word of mouth, based on, what the size of the co-packer is, and try to really think if you can bring them along and align on a bigger dream, because then it becomes easier for them to build that relationship.
It's great. Yeah, and I think that there's an opportunity sometimes to, you've got to your point, you've got to do the hard work. So even if, I'm gonna have Carol put an attachment into at the end of the session, there's a 2022 food and beverage co-packer, co-manufacturer list that exists. It's not inclusive, I'm sure, of everyone, but it's pretty extensive. But at the end of the day, I think still as an owner, as a founder, as a business owner, you got to get on the phone. You've got to make the contacts. You've got to go to the shows, whatever it is and actually have the conversations yourself, because until you know the dynamics and the actual capabilities, you've just got to keep working at that, I think. And that sometimes that seems like an awful lot of work. You'll have to go through, several iterations to find the one. But it's important to do that because it's everybody says it's your partner. So it's pretty important.
And one place, I would really recommend everybody to look into is as a founder, for example, if you have a brand or you're starting a company, you're really focused on your needs. I think just trying to, understand what your potential co-packer or partner, their needs are, their pain points are, I think it will go a long way for them to come to where you want them to go, because a lot of times you're asking them to tweak their processes, maybe run a pilot run, do few changes. So there's a lot of ups and downs come along a way while you're really trying to, test if, you can run that processy. I would just say, understanding manufacturing, their pain points goes a long way for giving your partners confidence that, you will not leave them in the lurch. You will be a good partner in terms of figuring out, what needs to be done. You'll not be like one-way streak.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be open to saying, hey, can I look at different ingredients? Can I look at different things in the process where you're together can really create a Mona Lisa? And I think that really helps. And I think that's my one advice to everybody, to really understand, your partner's drivers, because a lot of times people just go one way trying to say, I want this, you do it or not. It's not black and white as a world might say.
And Josh, I think from your experience, if a customer comes to you with a product, they describe their process to you, this is the equipment I use. How do you manage that with adjusting or having them adjust their needs to meet the finished production?
Right. No, thank you. That's a very good question, Cathy. Manufacturing is a lot more challenging, I think, than people appreciate. And I think that's part of the point that Prabal was making. And kind of ancient history, you were, as we always say, we're dumb co-packers. You've got 100,000 square foot factory and you just come to me, tell me how many you want and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work like that ever. And B, now even less so for a number of reasons. One, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today, 8.3% of the workforce is involved in manufacturing. Manufacturing is really kind of a dying art in this country. And which isn't to say that the locus of power has shifted to the manufacturers. Really, the partnership aspect of it really is key. So when we have entrepreneurs, startups coming to us, they need to be realistic about their expectations. And things that you can make on a small scale, on a limited basis, do not necessarily translate to scale up. Now, I think one of the questions is how much compromise does the business initiator accept. And that's a very tricky balance. And we've had people come to us when they were having product made elsewhere, where they really had no say so, and it was just put your name on it and this is what you're going to get, versus people that come to us and their expectations are unrealistic. I think it's critical to work in tandem between the business generator and the manufacturer, where they really have an understanding of what the proposition is, capabilities, things like that. I just don't think it's realistic to ignore the realities. There's a lot of limitations, and as Bill said, equipment, packaging, formulation, and nowadays there's a lot with supply chain. And in fact, just coming from the private label show, the concept of OTIF, on time in full, which is something that Walmart kind of pioneered, but nowadays in the food industry, everybody's talking about it, right? Can you actually get the product out? Well, that may depend on what your ingredient statement has. There's a lot of variables that are coming to bear now, as opposed to historically. One last point I would make quickly, because it's a key aspect with us. Food safety is often overlooked, and there is a wide spectrum of people. I mean, we recently went through a fairly major recall on an ingredient supplied by a very major national manufacturer that our partners Prairie City had spec'd, and yet it was, but we executed very well in tandem with Prairie City. Don't ignore the safety aspect, because it may not be top of mind at the outset. You know, you're more concerned with shelf life or quality or capacities and things like that. But longer term, you know, it's your brand, and you want to make sure that you're providing a safe product for your consumers.
I just like to emphasize that that quality of the product and safety of the product is not negotiable. Those things are not negotiable. But there are things that in your product line that when you get it into a co-pack facility, that you may have to make some compromises on. I mean, there is certain, and frankly, there may be ingredients that your co-packer is buying that he can buy better than what you could buy if you were making it yourself. And there may be things that you should fall on a sword over, but there may be some that you shouldn't fall on that you need to be flexible enough to fit into the needs of what the co-packer is able to produce from that standpoint. And it's a give and take. It's not all it's not all a one-way thing. But the one thing that I think that all of our co-packers and the co-packers don't have any, there's no incentive for them not to produce great quality product, because if you don't produce if you don't sell, they can't produce, and vice versa. So, I never had an issue with quality as long as I had an understanding with what that was. But one of the things that scares me a little bit, because I mentor a lot of up and coming entrepreneurs, is they have a laundry list of all the things that they either do or don't do within their product. It's organic, it's fat-free, whatever it is. And, not all those things can be done in a co-pack situation. Gluten-free, for instance, which is very popular now to have gluten-free, and I have nothing against gluten-free, it's very good, but it's very difficult to make a gluten-free product in a bakery that makes other products that are not gluten-free, because the particles and the cleaning of the machinery and that type of thing. So, you have to decide what's the most important for your product. and what that means for your consumer. And you know, as Josh said, you can do some of these things in a small scale, but when you have to be able to fit within a large scale co-pack manufacturer. And so there may be some of those things that you have to compromise on, and you have to really look at what the value is of those.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead,
Kamal,
Kamaal.
just a minute. I want to hear Kamal. I was just going to ask you with your business, with your,
Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch on what Bill and both Bill and Josh were talking about in terms of kind of compromising and understanding what's important, because there may be things that you have to prioritize. And so I think us, and I'm guilty of it myself, I think us as business owners sometimes can make our opinions far more important than the consumers. And we forget that the consumer is ultimately at the forefront of these products. And so making sure that you're going to bat for attributes that are actually going to impact purchase intent is key. And so if there are concessions that you have to make, if you know there's different coloring or something that's happening because of the process, and it's not going to really drive the needle in terms of purchase intent, then you should know that going in, and know that it's probably not worth completely changing or overhauling a co-man's process because of this one attribute, and be able to kind of make that list of key attributes and which ones are the most important for your consumer.
really understand it and kind of try testing it out with the co-manufacturer and see what.
Cathy, this is a very important point, and I want to make sure that we don't emphasize this enough. You really want to understand what's really important to your end consumer. A lot of time founders are really passionate about their product, but you really have to do a lot of work around the consumers. Why do they need the product? What's their need? Because that really translates to exactly what we are going to have is happening right now. At Brave Good Kind, we are gluten-free. And when we started, we said we need to be gluten-free certified, and our co-packer was like, absolutely not. We just cannot do it. So we went back to all that we have learned from our consumer, and we learned that our consumers only wanted gluten-free. They did not care a lot about, at least in our category, with the seal that it's certified. So we made a decision saying we will not push our co-packer because they were not willing to change, because that would have really cause a lot of disruption to where they're operating. So I think this is just one of an example, like Bill and Josh and Kamaal mentioned, that you really have to pick up your battles. There are areas where co-packer can really help you get volume discount, whether if you order packaging through them. So one of the examples. And then there is this aspect of saying, when you think about long-term partnership, you think about innovations. That's where co-packer can really help you while you're focusing and producing for your existing business. Doing those trial runs, doing those formula, tweaking. Our product is USDA. It has to be USDA approved, and that USDA approval is completely handled by co-packer. So, building that relationship, working towards not only your existing volumes once you start running, but also trying new product, new form in terms of innovation. That's where co-packers can really add a lot of value. But again, you have to build that trust. You have to build that working relationship where each of you are looking out for each other and really truly working as partners. It is easier said than done, because a lot of times, a lot of relationship becomes transactional. Bill and Josh I would not say is a commonplace, but but that's what you need to strive for. How do you take your relationship from being just a transactional one, but make it more strategic and more productive, if you will.
Don't misunderstand. Bill and I had plenty of rocky paths along the way too. Let's not kid ourselves. The tougher the discussion, Josh, tough discussions will always happen. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, you're not killing each other. Right. There is a certain amount of respect you have for each other. And I think it takes years and years of work to get to that respect. That was what I was mentioning.
Mhm.
Well, and as Bill pointed out, there's clearly the mutual interests. We want to make, we need to make money, but we also want them to make money. We want to make a good product, as I think Cathy mentioned. It's in the co-packer's best interest to give the best product possible, to their customers, so it sells more, it grows. I mean, Bill's success was part of our success.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then
I think
vice
it's important
versa.
to think about it that way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The tricky part, I think, is really the timing and the startup, because we were a tenth the size we are now, maybe even less, when we got going with them. So it was a little different equation. And both Kamaal and Prabal probably know this. There are companies that do nothing but co-pack or private label, but often it's I wouldn't say a side, but it's an aspect of their business. A manufacturer, I mean, one of the big differences is that we've got a lot of capital invested, right? So when you've got a factory, you need to keep it running. So the co-packing might be an aspect that's filling line time while you're doing your own branded product or working on stuff for some other supplier. When you're recruiting or looking for somebody to make your product, a co-manufacturer, you should keep that in mind, because I can't tell how many people come to us and say, "Oh, I've got truckload business. Costco wants it. I just need somebody to make it," over and over. And my retort is, "Oh, great. Well, then, you go pay me for the truckloads and pull it out of the door." It doesn't always start like that. It doesn't often start where, it's 100 miles an hour at the outset. So you have to moderate the sales pitch somewhat, and remember that everybody's got their own interests. So
One of the questions that we get, one of the participants had asked today is, what's a realistic timeline for someone that feels they're ready to start to scale to a co-packer to the point they actually are in production? Is there a general guideline to that? I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into that.
I think it has a lot to do with how developed your process and your product is from that standpoint. I mean, and it also depends on the relationship that you have with the specific co-packer. It was a lot easier for me to introduce products with co-packers when I already had business with them. I didn't have to sell them on who I was and what it is that we could do and that type of thing. In fact, in Josh's case, one of the things that happened was, we would do capability reviews on what products he had that might be added to our line. Well, that was something where I wasn't going to the co-packer. He was actually coming to me with ideas. And that's an ideal situation where he's looking for more business and I'm looking for more business, and we're just looking to capitalize on the idea. Now, Josh, I wish you had told me that I was covering a lot more of your overhead, but that's another story.
Yeah. So from my experience, I think it's, to, Bill's point, it absolutely depends on the product and the category, how developed is your product. Like if you're a new founder, and I think that's what the question is, as you're transitioning to co-packer, again, there's no general timeline. Relationship obviously helps, but at least it takes at least 6 months, in my opinion, because you start from benchtop where you share your product and then you start doing various iterations. You control the water table activity. There's a lot of process related stuff where there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of small runs that will happen. We generally call it, R&D runs. Maybe some folks call it, pilot run. So it takes a lot of back and forth. If you're an absolutely new product and you're trying to launch it, you're trying to get to this formulation. And don't forget, it doesn't just finish on formulation. Once you have the process in place and you feel good about formulation, you start working on claims, you start working on any kind of like USDA approval if that is required. So at least 6 months, I would say, if you're just coming on with the product. If your product, like, one of the examples is we're trying to look for a co-packer for our existing product, for example. For that, I will just send my existing product. They will look at it. I'll send them the spec sheet, and then we will start to understand. They'll start to understand how we're running it right now. They will then match and try to see. It is a little bit of shorter process because I have a product already. But for a new founder who's trying to get to a co-packer, he's found a co-packer. Great. Now what you need to do? Now you to get to run and create that product and iterate it, and to a point where you're really happy with the textures. And this takes time. They'll manufacture something in small batch, will send to you. Then you also have to figure out, small things where your R&D or your co-packer will help you. For example, if you need a mixer, for optimum mix, generally it is said that you need to run a half a mixer. So all these nuggets of wisdom and all this back and forth really helps if you have a good relationship and you give yourself time to get to that right product that will delight your consumer. And I think that's my 2 cents.
I would also say that the product or the packaging is often what took the longest time that would extend it out. So yes, 6 months would be, to me, a long time if everybody was on the same page, but it does take time to order and get packaging in and fit it within that needs.
Right, and adjust your if you have to adjust your equipment versus what you're currently using now.
Just one thing, Cathy, if I can add, I think this is again important because when you are a new founder and you're trying to get in, you'll not have all the answers ready. You cannot be buttoned up. There's no way, because you're doing gazillion things. I would say when you are actually working on the product and you're getting to formulation, I think you will then start thinking about what your assortment is, what your size is, how many SKUs you want to launch. So there are a lot of iteration goes. That's why it takes time, because if you have those answers ready and you're absolutely clear on what your retail, what your launch would be, yes, like Bill said, you can, expedite things and be more optimized. But a lot of times when you are first getting into it, there are a lot of questions that you don't start thinking. And, one of the things that we had, for example, is when we were launching, we were trying to build a 3-ounce pouch. As we were doing the formulation, we realized our margins and pricing, we suddenly came to a realization that we need to reduce the size. So we worked with the co-packer to change it to 2.5 ounce. So until those answers are clear, you cannot get to packaging, because you cannot order packaging unless you know your sizing and what you're trying to do, and then you work towards the artwork. So it's a art and a science of it. And everybody's path is different. And Kamaal can tell you that his path would have been different because, you don't go in a linear way. You try to do the best you can. And as you go along, you learn, and you need to give yourself flexibility, and your co-packer gives you flexibility to, iterate. And that's what the partnership is all about.
Yeah, I was going to say that my approach has always been to look at that piece production like I look at funding, where it's always nicer to look for it before you need it. And so ahead of time, getting the vetting done and understanding essentially who you want to work with, that may take longer than you think. Between visiting and getting to that bench top may take a couple months, even before the 6 months starts, right? And so if you understand like your production, or if let's say you're working out of a kitchen today, producing on your own, and you can foresee, your orders coming in, and you have forecasted that you're going to be X come next year, maybe now is the time to start at least vetting a potential partner for next year, or the, Q4 of next year. So, I think to definitely, at least to start vetting, the vetting process early, you can't really hurt. Obviously, that things may change with that co-packer. They may take on additional business between now and next year. But getting that piece done can hopefully expedite where you are when you actually need to transition to a co-packer.
I think, we get a lot of questions about what are if you walk into one of these co-packers that you're interested in, you think they might meet your needs. Is there a core list of maybe, 10 questions to ask? And one of them that we get asked a lot about, and Kamaal, maybe you can help with this and everybody pitch in on that, but what's the how do you protect things within your, at the co-packer, such as formulas, such as, any IP that you might have? Is there always a formal contract that should be signed? Is that just a standard NDA? What are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, we operate in a highly competitive space that has very low barriers to entry in condiments. And so, you're not going to necessarily get a patent on anything we produce. So really, we're protected by a trade secret, which is our formula, and that's protected by NDA. And then we do kind of a loose agreement with our co-packers in terms of just essentially establishing, the relationship between us. We currently aren't on contract for like X amount of volume at X amount of at X price, whatever the case may be. We're more in an agreement in terms of, that they're going to be our co-packer, we are, and that, essentially our recipes aren't going to leave that facility, and we're protected under the non-disclosure agreement. But, to the extent that you should be working with a lawyer, you should be working with an accountant, getting, some form of agreement, getting that at the very least an NDA in place is really, unless you are, working on some extremely novel unicorn technology, the chances of you having a patent are probably slim. And so you're really, in terms of your recipe, you're really protected by that non-disclosure agreement, and making sure that you're not handing out that recipe. You're going to have to hand it over when you're actually, working with a co-pack. We're making sure you're not handing it over willy-nilly, and that you're making sure that whoever you're talking to, you have an NDA in place, has been the method that we've worked with.
Great.
I'm sure Josh probably has, yeah.
So, to play the devil's advocate, and again, I apologize, this is, we've had this happen literally hundreds of times. Kamaal, the point that you make, this is a very low barrier to entry industry that we're in. You could take a decent chef and a decent baker, put them in a lab for 24 hours, and they're going to get 98% of what we get. A lot of people coming to us, and the holy grail is their recipe and their formulation, and they can't disclose, and they want to give, and I'm familiar with this. There's historically, there was a little black bag. We've had people that they wouldn't give us the whole recipe, and then they'd send us a mix, and you put in 10 ounces of this per batch, and that's the secret sauce, right? And that is some protection. But the honest to God truth of it is that there's not a lot of big secrets out there. I mean, Skinny Pop popcorn is popcorn, and RX bars were, they're bars. There is still the aspect of honor and principle and relationship, which I would argue NDAs aside, and we've signed thousands of them. You got to know who you're doing business with, and that's really the critical piece to my mind.
I would also not discount how important brand is, right? And so it's just as important to establish a strong brand as it is that recipe, because to Josh's point, reverse engineering is super easy to do, especially in the food space, right? And so the brand is really what's going to set you apart from any new entrant that is trying to replicate your brand.
Well, the brand, the distribution,
right,
the shelf presence, the shelf space. I mean, that to my mind, and again, just is really what the entrepreneur, the business initiator, that's what you own.
Yeah.
That's what you've really got.
I would agree that it's the brand and how you go to market and the distribution that you have. I remember the first time I went into a co-packer with my muffin top recipe, and I gave it to him and I said, "Could you make this?" And he looked at it for like 3 seconds. He goes, "Yeah, I can make it." I said, No, look a little bit more, will you?" And he goes, Yeah, I can make it. And the reality is he was right. He can make it. And I mean, I think that if you've got the right co-packer, they have the capability of doing what you want them to do. And like Josh, I probably signed hundreds of NDAs, and I was not a big contract guy. And the company I sold the company, and they required contracts. And but at the same time, you have to know who you're in business with, and you have to make sure that you have a letter of agreement, what it is that you want them to produce, how you want to produce, what's the price. You can confirm all that in the letter of agreement. But the reality is that my experience is, particularly people that own their own business, they get very prickly when you when you throw a contract in their face, because they look at it as I'm going to have lawsuit problems down the road. And the reality is that, you got to have a trust barrier, and you got to have an agreement, and, who takes care of what, when type of thing. But the reality is that it's not something that, again, you should fall on your sword over.
And just a couple of questions that are being asked too is if there's a couple of key questions so if you walk in the door with your product, obviously I think bringing the product is important. If you have samples, it's critical that they see it. Maybe understand your current sales strategy, or your P&L, whatever that might be, just your financials to some extent. But are there other key questions, such as, I know one is, how do you manage to ensure the quality is met, the standards are met? So that, having that conversation, making sure that there are practices taking place in the facility that I would feel comfortable with my product. Other key questions that you guys would suggest that is sort of on that list of things as you walk in to visit 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 co-manufacturers?
I think one thing I would just quickly add here is, like, you should be prepared with like your product, what your product, like, as I said, like reason of being, but also you also need to do some kind of a volumetric analysis of the demand, because, a lot of times you go to, like, I go to Josh and Josh is saying, I'm only looking to invest in long-term relationships. What do you see the brand, do you see the brand volume year 2 and 3? So, a lot of times it stumps a lot of founders. And I think having a clear point of view, as well as why, you're confident that those assumptions are, fairly robust, it goes a long way in building that confidence. Because everybody knows the first year when you're just starting out, it would not be bonanza in terms of volume. But,
Knowing what that is to start with. Yeah.
Exactly. And your co-packer is often looking at understanding, where do we go long-term here? Like, should I invest in you? Why do I believe in you? And, that is where we need to give them a reason to believe. You give them a proof point on saying, hey, this is a marathon, be our partner, and it will become like a win-win situation.
I think the other thing, or the other reason to believe, is you have orders in hand. If you have a product that has more demand than you can produce, or what have you, if you've got proof of concept and you've got buyers that have bought the product, it's a lot less easier for a co-packer to say yes, particularly if they can do the product, than just going in there and saying, hey, I have a hope and a prayer that I'm going to be able to take this product to market.
They're going to be more inclined to partner with you if they see evidence. Yeah.
I would, Cathy, and I think to the questioner's point, if the co-packer has any hesitancy in having you on site during production, I would run the other way, because there are, and we've run into it. We've had people come to us where, they got burned. They went to people that were not really, again, a lot of manufacturers, they just need volume to keep their machines running, and they're not really interested in a partnership. Our most successful startups are typically when we've got the founder, he's there, he's on site. I mean, and we've got a couple guys, they run, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a year. They fly out here from the East Coast and rent a motel room, and they're on the floor with our production guys and with our QC people and with our plant managers and all the whole team that makes it work. Going back briefly to the timetable aspect, and again, I mean, we're doing this constantly. I mean, we're always trying new stuff, partly because it's fun, right? And that's where the gold nuggets lie. I would think within 3, you probably want to start with a pilot run, a trial run, and fairly early on, within 2 to 3 months, just to kind of see where it's coming out. And then to Bill's point about, especially now, some of the lead times on packaging, polypropylene film isn't too bad, but we've got a poly-lined paper overwrap, which is 16 to 18 weeks out. You just can't get it. You know, we've got, we make a cheesecake on a stick. The sticks are coming from China. And there's still a lot of hiccups with the freight aspects of it, right? So it, you know, the downstream stuff might get pushed out a little bit, but I would try to get in, you know, fairly early, 2 to 3 months out, you know, and again, sort of proof of concept, proof of viability in the facility.
Yeah, I just to add on to that, I think even at a granular level, looking at some of the ancillary issues that may impact your business when choosing a co-packer, like location, if they're tolling versus turnkey, and what that would mean for your, you know, organizing the supply chain if it's a tolling method and you're responsible for getting all the ingredients to the co-packer. Some of those things should be taken into consideration when choosing and or when deciding to, you know, move forward with a co-packer. Is like, how is that going to impact your day-to-day business if you're now shipping things to a location that maybe, you know, cost you an arm and a leg to get to. So just take those things into consideration when, you know, when selecting or when deciding to work with a co-packer.
Yeah,
Yes,
I would be
Go ahead.
very hesitant to, I never tried to do the co-packer's job. The co-packer's job is to produce the products, and, you know, they gotta have the products on hand. If you've got to ship products in there, and, you know, it's got to be within his production planning process, so he knows how many packaging and how much flour or how much whatever else he has. I can't manage that. He's got to manage that. So I try to keep things as simple as possible, which is we agree on a product. I give you a PO, you produce it, you ship it, I pay you, repeat. I mean, I don't try to do their business. And I think, you know, there was times where I wouldn't talk to Josh for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
I think,
And just
I
one
think,
thing I would, Kamal, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I think ideally, most folks would like to be on a completely on a tolling method, or not on tolling, on a turnkey method. But I think maybe smaller brands may have a harder time working with smaller co-packers that aren't willing to necessarily take on that, especially with prices being, you know, rising and ingredients getting even more expensive. They want that burden on the brand versus them taking that on. So some of these folks may have challenges finding a completely turnkey solution.
So we're about
Yeah,
almost out
and
of
just
time. Just go ahead, Prabal.
go ahead.
I
No,
said we're
the
up
only thing I would
almost-
say is, like, don't be afraid to move away. Like, sometimes you learn new things, and when you, like Josh said, you as a new founder, you go into a you know, co-packer, you're working with them, you get to see them, but, you know, oftentimes you really understand whether it's a right fit or not. But don't be afraid to understand that it is not a good fit and move away. So a lot of times when you put some resources, it's very difficult to move away your tendencies to make it work. I think, like with anything, you need to really understand if it's the right fit or not. And I think that's where your initial focus should be when you are just starting out.
That's a great point, because you know when it's time to cut, because it may not be the right fit. Thank you for that. Just any final thoughts on the topic? That we got a few minutes left. Kamaal, anything that you want to kind of just wrap up on your thoughts with this before we end the session?
No, I mean, from our perspective, I'm, you know, a smaller brand, and I think, you know, us working with a co-packer has definitely changed our business in a positive manner. I think, like everyone has said, it's a relationship, and keeping that in mind when searching for and when working with a co-packer is extremely important. And knowing that, like anything else, like you've heard Bill and Josh talk about, it's not gonna be all smooth sailing the whole time, but it's a relationship that requires work like any other relationship. And there can be huge benefits if you find the right partner and you treat it like a true partnership.
Excellent. Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I never had a manufacturing facility. And when I sold the company, I sold it to McKee Foods, which is Little Debbie Snacks, and they took over all the co-pack. They had their own manufacturing facility. And one of the reasons why they bought us was because they couldn't figure out how we were doing what we were doing with 13 employees and 11 co-packers. And, you got to be really, and so we just didn't have the overhead they had. We didn't have all of that. So I think that there's two different models that you can go out there and be very successful. One takes a lot more overhead, a lot more money. And so what you're really doing essentially is borrowing other people's overhead and producing and people that have the talent to make the product that you need. And if in the right situation, it's fantastic.
Thank you for that. Josh, your thoughts?
I would argue that the secret to mine and Bill's success was sushi lunch every 3 or 4 weeks. Kind of hash it out. It really is it's a partnership. I mean, if you're arm's length and going to what I always called a dumb co-packer, he's just out there, it's just plug and chug. Real hard for smaller startup. I mean, when we first started with Bill, he was in his basement, right? And it turned out to be, like he said, we grew together and
Fantastic. Yep.
ate a lot of sushi together, I think. That was it.
Prabal, anything on your side that you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, just as a somebody who's really starting out and trying to figure out if co-packer is the way. I think it's just really trying to really understand if that's the right point in their evolution, if they're ready for it. And I always say, when you are with co-packer, you're not only delivering for now, you also have to deliver for a year from now. So when you select a co-packer, it has to be a long-term partner, because they might fulfill your volume right now, but if a year from now they cannot keep up or scale up with you, I think you will be in market trying to find more other or a bigger co-packer. So I think it's an important decision, and you just have to balance the right now with the long term, and I think that's very important.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for such a good conversation. And Carol, you want to close for us?
Yes, thank you, every single one of you, for the expert insights and advice that you have shared today with the community. So thank you, Cathy, for leading the session, Bill, Kamaal, Prabal, and Josh for sharing your best practices today. We really appreciate your time and effort, and we thank you all for joining us. There's so much to cover when it comes to co-manufacturing. It's hard to squeeze everything in 1 hour, but we hope we were able to cover most of the pain points, and we will follow up with the recording and additional resources to help you all find the right co-manufacturer, and hopefully establish a successful relationship like Bill and Josh did, that is set to get both organizations to the next level and to succeed on the long term. We will be back this Thursday, November 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time with our fourth and last session of the Thriving in the Future of Retail webinar series. We will be covering opportunities for category disruption and differentiation. We'll be exploring how to identify these opportunities, and we will also cover category expansion as a brand scales. Our senior advisor, Tara Levine, will be leading the session with Anna Peck, the founder and CEO at Chia Smash, Nona Lim, the founder and CEO at Nona Lim, and Ted Teakin, the founder and CEO at Keto & Co. They're all successfully disrupting their categories, so we highly encourage you to join the session or to sign up to get the recording in order to acquire exclusive insights to succeed in the future of food. So sign up, hope to see you then. Thanks again for our amazing panelists today, and I wish you all a wonderful night and a wonderful rest of your week. And we look forward to continuing the conversation offline.
Thank you, Carol. Bye. Bye, everybody.